Hey guys, this is Gary, and in this video we're going to take a look at adding some functionality to our calculator app. So in order to be at the right spot for this video, you want to make sure that you have your calculator open, and you also want to make sure that you have the page open that includes the calculator. So because we're going to be coding in JavaScript in this video, I am going to open up my JavaScript console. So on the Chromebooks, to open this up, whoa, it's super zoomed in. That should be Control Shift J. So right now I have no JavaScript code running, so I shouldn't be getting any messages in the console. So the first thing that we want to check is we want to make sure that we have our JavaScript file linked to our HTML page. So your last line of code inside of the HTML before the body and the HTML document close should be this line here. And what this will do is it will say, after you load all of the content for the page, link in the JavaScript file. And we want that to be at the end because ultimately we need to have created all of these buttons first before we run our JavaScript so that our JavaScript can interact with these buttons. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the JavaScript file. And we're going to do the same thing that we normally do, which is to select all of the elements on the page that we will interact with. So I'm going to start by selecting these two input boxes, because of course part of our interaction with our calculator will be to get the values that the users type here. So I'm going to call the first number, I'll call the first number number1, or num1. And what's interesting about this is actually I have to be a little bit careful here. When you select these things, you're not actually selecting the value that goes in it. So you're not selecting 35, you're selecting like this whole element. So actually number1 is probably not a great choice here. Let me call this input1. And I'm going to say document.querySelector. And what this line of code is there's something called the document object, which is a document data type, and it refers to the HTML document. And I want to be able to select this first input. So let's give this input an ID of input1 in order to make it selectable. Let's also give this ID here an input2. Oops, that's my toolbox, which I'm not using yet. All right, so then here what we'll do is we'll do hashtag input1, and then we'll do let input2 equal the same thing here, and make sure that when you copy and paste, you change this to input2. All right, so I'm just going to run my code and make sure I don't have any errors. Great, no errors happening. And here's something interesting. We can actually interact a little bit more with the console than I've shown you previously. So if you type in input1 here, it should highlight that, and then you press enter. It should highlight that input1 is this guy right here. And if we type in input2 here, because in JavaScript that variable means this one, it should show us that input2 is that guy. And so now we know that our inputs are working. So any variables that we create in our JavaScript code, we can access in our console. All right, so that's great. Now I'm going to be selecting only one of the buttons for this video. And the reason why I'm selecting only one is I think once we do one of these buttons, it will make it evident to you how you do the rest of these. So I'm only going to select the add button. So let me go over here and see, okay, button is ID equal add. Great. So going to the JavaScript file, let add equal document.querySelector hashtag add. And you're going to have a couple of more buttons here. Lastly, let's select the two places where the text is going to change. Select the two output areas. And when I'm thinking about output areas, I'm thinking about this plus sign will change depending on what's clicked here, as well as the answer that we get in the result section. So let's make sure that that's all working. So here, operation text is the ID for this one, and then answer is the ID for this one. So I'm just going to do 2 more lines of the query selector, and I'll do operation text as the first one, operation text. I'll change the ID as well to operation text. Next up, the add one is no longer add. What is it? It's result, I think. No, it's answer. Okay, so I want to refresh my page over here and make sure everything is working. So I know input 1 and input 2 are working. Let me type in add, and it immediately shows me that add is that button there. When I press enter and highlight it, yes, that's looking great. Operation text, let's make sure that we're all on the same page there. Operation text is this section here, which looks great. And then answer should be hopefully that last black box. Let's make sure that that's right. Yes, answer is that. Wonderful. All right, so now we've got everything selected on the page, and you might have a couple of more lines here if you've selected those buttons already for minus, multiplication, division, and mod. So the last part of this is now we need to actually add our event listener to these buttons. We'll have a different event listener for each button, and it should actually, do the calculations. So let's see how that works. Add event listeners to each button. So the easiest way to add an event listener is to go to your toolbox and copy the code for adding an event listener. So the way that we do the add event listener is elements on the page listen for events. In particular, the element that I want the user to interact with, to do something to, is this plus button. That button's name is add. So add is going to, oh, this is a confusing one here, sorry. The add button, which as a reminder is this button here. We want to add an event listener to that. And the event that we're going to listen for is if the user clicks on that. Then here what we're going to do is between these curly braces, we're going to write a code block, a group of code that only runs when we click the add button. So the first thing we're going to need to do to add these 2 numbers is we're going to need to, and just as a reminder, this is a really important distinction. Input 1 does not refer to the number that we type. So input 1 is not 35 here. What input 1 is it's the whole box. So what we're going to have to do is extract the numbers. So let's let number 1 equal, go to input 1 and get the value from it. And I don't think there's parentheses there. So go to number 1. So number 1 is going to be go to input 1 and get the value from it. Let's let number 2 equal, go to input 2 and get the value from it. So what we're going to do here, just to make sure that things are working, is we can output text from our code into the console using a nice function called console.log. So what we're going to do is we're going to output number 1 when we click the button, and we're going to output number 2 when we click the button. So I'm also going to change the comment here to get the values numbers from the input elements. So we're getting the values from the input elements. All right, let's see if this works. So I'm going to refresh things here. I'm going to click the add button. Okay, I got 2 blank lines, which is a good sign. Let me put some numbers here to see if it works. And now I'll click the add button. All right, wonderful. So we've got 35 and 4, and that looks awesome. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make an error. So let's do let answer equal. Oh, guys, I can't do this because that would be reproducing answer. Let final value equal. So to go from these 2 input values, 35 and 4, if I'm adding, then to find the answer, we should do num1 plus num2. So what we're going to do next is we'll do a console.log of the final value. Compute the final value, which will be the answer. All right, so let's make sure things are working here. 35 and 4. Oh no! 35 plus 4 gave us 354. And this is a data type error, right? The way it added these was it added them like strings instead of adding them like numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something important here, which is we can't recreate num1, but we can modify the value of num1. We can say num1, the new value for num1, should equal a new JavaScript function called number. And what this will do is num1 is equal to the number version of what was previously in num1. Num2 is equal to the number version of what was previously in num2. And what this will do is it will turn num1 into the number version and then replace in the computer's memory from num1 the string version with the number version. So now because num1 and num2 are being redefined as number versions of themselves, our final value should actually compute things correctly. Let's make sure that works. 35, 4, add it, 39, awesome. It's adding as numbers now. So let me add a comment here, convert the numbers to numbers. Convert the input numbers to numbers and replace in the computer's memory the string versions with the number versions. So now the last step is we don't really want this stuff to be displayed on the console log. What we really want is we want this information to be displayed on our screen. So one thing that we want is we want to make sure that this operation here is plus for this one. So let's take operation text, which we created here. Operation text without the dot. And the way that we control what's displayed inside of operation text is we can change the inner HTML of this element, what's inside of the tags here. So of course it's starting off as plus, which is great, but if we clicked minus, we want it to become minus, times should be times, and then back to plus should go back to plus. So we'll make the operation text dot inner HTML equal to a plus sign. Next up, what we'll do is we'll make the answer, which will be this spot here, the inner HTML of that should equal the final value. And just to highlight what we've been talking about with this data conversion thing, is we really want it to display as the symbols. No, actually, you know what? I'm making things complicated. Let's just see if this works. The answer.innerHTML should be equal to the final value. All right, let's see if things work. So we'll do a refresh. We'll press, okay, of course this plus this is 0. 35 plus 4 is 39, nice. All right, so I'm feeling really good about that. I didn't get any errors in my console, which is great. What you can look at doing next is you're gonna have really similar code for each of your buttons. So each of the steps should be the same for the button. Step 1, get the values from the input elements. Step 2, convert those values to numbers. Step 3, compute the final value. And then step 4 is to display these things. I'll say 4 and 5 is to display these things. So you can make good use of copying and pasting to change how each of these buttons work. And hopefully things are clear. Bye guys, have a great day, and please program the rest of these buttons.